All right. So what I wanted to do today is different from what we've been doing the past several weeks, and that is not to talk about Israel and different aspects of the war between Israel and Hamas, but to talk about something else that has been in the news, and and that is that laws concerning abortion in America. And I bring it up now only because that my rabbinical association, the Rabbinical Assembly, just published an a paper called "Understanding Jewish Views of Abortion: An Overview." So this is unusual for the law committee of the conservative movement to do, to publish an overview statement that is not a statement of halacha. That is, it's not a response to a particular question. It's just an overview of what the conservative movement's law committee's position is regarding abortion. And so because the paper was published or approved on November 28th, just 2 months ago or 6 weeks ago, but it only became published within the Rabbinical Assembly just last week or so. So when it did, I thought this would be a good thing to look at. It's like 8 pages at the most, and I just want to make sure that we understand what the conservative movement Jewish perspective is regarding abortion, as opposed to different states in America passing laws prohibiting abortion and from at least 6 weeks of pregnancy on, right? A lot of states are doing that, if not trying to ban abortion altogether. Not and even allowing for the health of the mother and rape and incest, but even there are some states that are not even allowing those exceptions. So before I get into the Jewish perspective on abortion, I just want to get to and just a question in the chat: would the conservative perspective be the same as Orthodox and Reform? So I would say that okay. So I will answer the question this way, Lori. The conservative movement perspective would be the same as Orthodox in that the conservative movement goes about this by way of Jewish law. It's through the lens of the tradition, the centuries of tradition of Jewish law, as opposed to the Reform movement that uses Jewish law as one factor in making a Jewish decision. So for the Reform movement, Jewish law has a vote in deciding a matter of Jewish ethics or morality, but for the Reform movement, it's not a veto. Ethical and moral value positions for the Reform movement are made differently than they are for conservative and Reform, because conservative and Reform are based on Jewish law. All right, so that doesn't mean that Jewish law for the conservative movement disallows a more modern or different approach. It's just that it makes it so. For example, within Orthodox, the Orthodox legal establishment hasn't allowed for homosexual marriage. So that is still a no-no within all branches of the Orthodox denominations. But within the conservative movement, it is permitted. And so it is permitted according to halacha, according to the conservative movement, just based on where the conservative movement is willing to go in its interpretation of Jewish law that the Orthodox is not willing to go. When it comes to abortion, Orthodox and conservative would be the same, and we'll see that from what I'm going to share with you. So there's not much difference when it comes to Orthodox versus conservative about this. Let me just say now about how decisions of Jewish law are made within the conservative movement. So as a rabbi, because I was ordained as a rabbi by a recognized institution of the conservative movement, the Jewish Theological Seminary, there are other institutions, the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies in Los Angeles. There's a rabbinical school in Buenos Aires. There's one in Germany, and there's one in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem. So these are the schools that are that are recognized as ordaining institutions of the conservative movement. Anyone who's ordained from any one of these institutions has the right to interpret Jewish law for his or her synagogue. I prefer, and I think most conservative rabbis prefer, to rely on decisions from the law committee of the conservative movement to make decisions, as opposed to me making the decision myself. So that's the way I've always done it for the 35 years I've been a rabbi, 30 here at Shaarei Tefillah, 5 in Massachusetts beforehand. That's just the way I prefer to do it, because the law committee has put in the research and has done the deliberation on matters of Jewish law. So, in other words, there were 1 or 2 conservative rabbis who bucked the system and were known to be willing to officiate at marriages of homosexual people before the conservative movement's law committee officially adopted that as a position of the conservative movement. So there were 1 or 2 rabbis who decided on their own that they would officiate at marriages. So I was not willing to do that. I wanted to wait until the conservative movement and the law committee made that change. So the way the law committee works is that there are 25 people who serve on the law committee. Most of them are rabbis, and most of them are appointed by the Rabbinical Assembly, that is the Association of Conservative Movement Rabbis. They're appointed by the Rabbinical Assembly. Some are appointed by the Jewish Theological Seminary, and some are appointed by the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism. So there are 1 or 2 non-rabbis who serve on the law committee, but most of them are rabbis. And there's a chairman of the committee who sets the agenda. And the way decisions work now is that if a paper comes before the committee and it has requisite amount of votes, it becomes an accepted position of the committee. So that is, it used to be that there was a minority opinion and a majority opinion that judged the opinions that were passed by the committee, so that most rabbis would follow the majority opinion, even though the minority opinion could be followed. It lent itself, because it was labeled a minority opinion, as not the preferred opinion. So now they took the labels off, and just as if it receives the requisite amount of votes, it's an accepted position. Okay, so that's how the law committee works in general. We can talk about the law committee another time, but that's how it works in the conservative movement. Within Orthodoxy, there are deliberative bodies within certain segments of Orthodoxy, but usually it is individual rabbis who are known to be experts in Jewish law that who on their own produce papers and answers to halachic questions, and usually those rabbis are the authorities to which different segments of the Orthodox community differ. So there isn't a committee, it's individual rabbis who are known as experts in halakha, and they are the go-to people that a lot of rabbis go to for decisions. So within Orthodoxy, it's individual rabbis who are known as authorities. Within the conservative movement, it's the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards. And within the Reform movement, the Reform movement itself, its rabbinic association does have a deliberative body about principles, morals, ethics, and they'll publish papers like that. But again, Jewish law doesn't have the primacy in the Reform movement as it does in the conservative movement. Okay, so because of everything regarding legislation in states about abortion recently and the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the law committee felt that it was important to publish this paper that was written. I'm going to share my screen and we'll see it. That was written by two rabbis, one Rabbi Susan Grossman, who's retired from Beth Shalom in Columbia, just nearby, classmate of mine from rabbinical school, and Avram Reisner, who's also nearby. He's a rabbi in Baltimore. So the two of them, Reisner himself especially, is an expert on biomedical ethical issues and has been on the law committee for many, many years. A very, very knowledgeable rabbi about matters of Jewish law. And Susan Grossman also was studying towards a PhD in Talmud before before the seminary then allowed women to enter rabbinical school. So she's also, and she's on the editorial committee of the Eitz Chaim, the Chumash that we use of the conservative movement. So two knowledgeable people who had written papers about abortion before, they came together to write this overview to remind us, conservative rabbis, to remind us in the conservative movement what the conservative movement says about abortion. So I just want to start. Let's start at reading. Judaism values life. The toast L'chaim, to life, exemplifies Judaism's priority and commitment to protect and enhance life. This commitment to life is reflected throughout Jewish law based on the rabbinic understanding of the biblical words v'chai bahem from Leviticus 18, you shall keep my laws and my rules by the pursuit of which human beings shall live. I am Adonai. So another way to say this is that pikuach nefesh, the saving of a life, is primary to everything else. And other laws, like Shabbat laws, can be violated in order to save a life. And in fact, if someone has a gun to your head and says, do this or I'll kill you, you do it except for idolatry, murder, and sexual immorality. So if somebody puts a gun to your head and says, have relations with that person or I'll kill you, then you have to be killed. If he says, murder that person or I'll murder you, then you have to be killed. Bow down to that idol or I'll kill you, you have to be killed. But anything else, any of the 610 other mitzvot can be violated in order to save your life. And that is another way of saying what this first paragraph said. Okay, so life is most important. So now the question for this is, how do we define when does life begin? Okay, what we have to understand about all these abortion laws that are being passed around the country is that they are all based on a Christian understanding of when life begins, which some might argue that it's backed up medically as well. But the question The question Judaism asks is, when does life begin? And by that, Judaism means, when does life become viable? So that's how Jewish law understands life. Life meaning viable life. Okay, so yes, and a fetus becomes a fetus when the egg is fertilized in the womb, right? When that fertilized egg gets implanted in the womb, that arguably is the beginning of a new life form. So states have adopted the states that have prohibited abortion and added severe restrictions on abortion understand the embryo attaching to the wall of the uterus as the beginning of life, and that life form that is in the mother's womb is just as important as you or I, people who are outside of their mother's womb and are living human beings. Jewish law understands that that embryo that is in the womb is not yet a viable life. And for Jewish law, life means viability outside of the womb. Inside the womb, it's something else. It's a different category, but it is not human life. Okay, so just want to understand that. Feel free to interrupt with a question at any time, but I wanted us to understand that as we begin to look at the paper, which is going to elaborate on what I just said. So, ensoulment, when the soul enters the body, does not translate into a juridical definition of human life according to Judaism, unlike in Christianity today. So another way of what I was saying is, when the egg becomes fertilized and then gets implanted into the wall of the uterus, that is the formation of a fetus, but it's also ensoulment. In other words, that for Christianity, the idea is that a soul enters that fetus to, as it then becomes a human being. Now, Judaism understands that there's a soul in that fetus too, but it doesn't mean that that fetus is life, because God forbid that fetus is miscarried. Clearly, that fetus is not viable. It does not live outside the womb if a mother miscarries that fetus, right? So a baby, a fetus, once it is born through labor and delivery, then becomes a human being. But we'll get to this even more, even in the process of delivery. So we'll see. So just because the fetus might have a soul doesn't mean that it counts as a viable human life. Through the 40th day following conception, the rabbis treat the fetus as mere liquid, maya de alma, right? So 40 days, if the woman miscarries in within the first 40 days, there's something there, but it's, according to the rabbis, it's maya de alma. It's like regular water that has been passed. Though the soul enters before birth, and that there's midrash that from which that idea is taken, The fetus is not considered a person. Lav nefesh hu. It is not a body. Nefesh could be translated as soul. It could also be translated as body. The fetus is not considered a body, a person, until birth. Right? So that's from the Tractate Sanhedrin, a section of the Talmud, with comments on it. Rashi, 1,000 years ago. Yad Ramah, a commentary to the Shulchan Aruch, the first collection of Jewish law from 500 years ago. So a fetus is not considered a person until birth, though cherished as a potential life. So there's potential life, there's potential viability, but it's not viable yet. A fetus is expressly excluded from the category of human life in Jewish law. This distinction between what is and is not considered human life under Jewish law significantly impacts Judaism's historical approach to abortion, prioritizing the well-being of the mother. Okay, so there are different stages. There's 40th day and before, and then there's 40th day and after. For the rabbis, 40th day and after, that is 40th day of pregnancy and after, the fetus has human form, but it's still not a viable human being. Okay, so the one major proof text that all the rabbinic sources from the time of the Mishnah till today use to base this argument that a fetus is not the same as human life is the following. According to Judaism, a fetus is part of its mother's body. According to Jewish law, a fetus is considered part of its mother's body until birth. The classic rabbinic proof comes from the Bible, Exodus 21. If a pregnant woman is physically injured during a fight between two men so that a miscarriage but no other harm occurs, the perpetrator is fined. Okay? I punch a pregnant woman, and that punch to her belly causes her to miscarry. I am not subject to execution because I have not murdered the baby. That what I am subject to is a fine, as if I have injured another part of her body, or if I gouged out her eye or cut off her hand. Okay? So when the Torah talks about eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, the rabbis understand that as monetary compensation. I gouge out somebody's eye, I then have to pay the person back a particular fine for injuring that person. So the same thing applies if I injure a woman, cause a pregnant woman, causing her to miscarry. So the miscarriage then is subject to a fine. It doesn't subject me to the laws of execution that I would be subject to had I murdered that woman. Okay? So because the fetus, causing the woman to miscarry, thereby destroying the fetus, is not considered murder, has not been considered murder from the time of the Torah, and is further enhanced in rabbinic law and supported in rabbinic law as not murder. Causing a woman to miscarry is not considered murder because that fetus is not human life. It's potential human life, but it's not human life. It's a different category. Okay? So the rabbis read the verse to mean no other harm happens to the woman besides the miscarriage. The loss of the fetus is not considered murder because it is considered part of the woman's body. It has no independent legal identity. All states that are passing restrictions and anti-abortion laws see that fetus as a legal identity, as a human being. Okay? Jewish law says no, the fetus does not have independent legal identity. That is why a pregnant woman who converts to Judaism gives birth to a Jewish child. No additional conversion ceremony is required because the fetus is legally considered part of the mother's body when she converts and not a separate person in need of conversion. In other words, if a pregnant woman converts to Judaism and the fetus is a separate human being, then her conversion would have had no effect on her fetus. And when the baby is born, then the baby would need to be converted to Judaism too, because it was a separate entity. And the mother's conversion would not have had an impact on it. But because the fetus is part of the mother, then just as you can't say that that a woman's arm is not Jewish, but the rest of her body is Jewish when she immerses in the mikveh. That just doesn't make sense because her arm is part of her. You can't say that her foot is not Jewish, but the rest of her is Jewish. It just doesn't make sense. Her whole body is Jewish, and therefore the fetus inside of her, which is part of her body, becomes Jewish too. So when a pregnant woman converts to Judaism, then the fetus inside of her is automatically Jewish also. Because just as her hand and her finger and her hair is Jewish, so too the fetus is Jewish. Okay? Now we get to then, since now this is reiterating for us the Jewish legal perspective on how to understand the fetus regarding its status in Jewish law, understanding that it is not a separate human life independent of any other life. Since we understand the fetus as part of the mother's body, that raises questions of how we understand then abortion. Recognizing the preciousness of potential life in every fetus, Jewish law generally does not permit the destruction of a fetus without cause. Okay? So, in other words, abortion for the sake of birth control, right? Abortion as birth control is not Jewishly legal, because there's a potential for human life. And the random idea, I'm just not in the mood to be pregnant today, or I just don't want to be pregnant now, because, in other words, a woman deciding instead of taking birth control pills or insisting that her partner use a condom or any other kind of prophylactic method like that, decides to have an abortion instead, that you can't do. Nobody would allow a woman under Jewish law to use abortion, to rely on abortion for the sake of birth control, okay? Because of the potential of human life. However, we'll get to where there is cause, Judaism permits abortion. So now these are the causes where abortion would be permitted. In general, Jewish law prohibits needless wounding. Wounding, for example, surgery is only permitted in order to heal. Therefore, since the fetus is considered part of its mother's body, Jewish law permits abortion to protect the mother's health. So if the woman's physical health is in danger by the pregnancy, then it's clear that abortion would be warranted in order to protect the mother's health. Okay? The paper is going to explain and expand what health means. Is it physical health? Is it mental health? And we'll get there. Jewish law requires an abortion to protect the mother's life, because the mother's life always takes precedence over the potential life of the fetus within her. That is why even the strictest interpretation of Jewish law require an abortion to protect the mother's life at all stages of the pregnancy, even after labor has begun. And that's from the Mishnah. There's a graphic Mishnah that even while the mother is in the process of labor and the fetus is emerging from the body, and that delivery is threatening the life of the mother, according to Jewish law, that baby can be killed if it will save the mother's life. Now, that doesn't work that way, and I don't think it works that way. There are cases where the pregnancy, the delivery, the mother's life is in danger. So there are other things you can do to save the baby, C-section, whatever, right? But in pre-medical knowledge that goes back to the time of the Mishnah, thinking that perhaps stopping this pregnancy, even during delivery, if that will save the mother's life, it can be done, because the baby is considered a rodef, a pursuer. This relates to the 6th commandment, which is lo tirtzach, meaning don't murder. Thou shalt not murder. But it doesn't say thou shalt not kill. Therefore, if somebody is coming to attack you and threaten your life, you have the right to kill that person in order to save your life. Same is true. This pregnancy, the delivery of this baby, is threatening the mother's life. That baby is considered a potential murderer. And therefore, according to this understanding of Jewish law, that baby is allowed to be killed in order to, it's not even a baby yet. The fetus is allowed to be killed in order to save the mother's life. Yes, Perry.
I find it interesting that in that middle paragraph, it says, therefore, since the fetus is considered part of the mother's body, Jewish law permits abortion to protect the mother's health. The
Yes.
word health. And then
Yes.
thereafter, it's really talking about life. Is there a distinction?
Right. So the particular example is about the life of the mother being threatened. The rest of this will talk about the health of the mother being threatened. So health to the point that she would. So her health is imminently threatened by the delivery of the baby. Her health would be down the road, her life would be down the road threatened by being pregnant. So she's not, the fetus isn't killing her now, but maintaining the pregnancy will eventually kill her. So, okay, so there are different stages in which the pregnancy could be threatening to the woman's health. This also applies, by the way, if it is found through genetic testing that this fetus has a terminal disease. So, for example, Tay-Sachs, which usually is tested for before the couple even gets married, to make sure that they're not carriers of the Tay-Sachs gene, but some other horrible genetic diseases, if it's found that the baby has something like that. There's a case that I had real life 20 years ago. A couple came to me in my office when the shul was on Lockwood Drive, found out that the baby had this horrible tumor growing outside of its body from the spine. And clearly, according to the doctors, this baby is going to die in utero, if not be born and then die within a day. So the couple came to me to see, could they have an abortion at that point? And it's clear, yes. But however, they're in their 3rd term, and it is 20 years ago, and you need an ethics board in a hospital in the state of Maryland to approve a late-term abortion like that. So by the time they got the approval, she was already at 38 weeks or something like that. So they just had her go through delivery, and she gave birth to a stillborn. So it was terrible, terrible, emotionally painful to this couple, and just a terrible, terrible thing. But at that, in that case, or cases like that, abortion is not only warranted, but is you have to do it. Jewish law says you need to do this here for the sake of the mother, okay? Because the mental health of the mother is just as important as the physical health of the mother. So let's go on. The Mishnah permits an abortion until the head or most of the fetal body has emerged from the mother during birth. Even at this latest stage of the birth process, Jewish authorities still allow the fetus to be this is awful, to be dismembered if necessary to protect the mother's life. In such cases, the physician can act on behalf of the mother, in effect as her agent. Maimonides treats the fetus like a pursuer, like I said, a rodef, when the fetus endangers the mother's health or life. Just as a pursuer must be stopped from endangering another by whatever means necessary, the fetus must be stopped from endangering its mother, even though its threat is not intentional. Okay? So there are a couple of categories that we're dealing with here that are that have to be understood when we understand Jewishly the aspects of abortion. So the fetus is not equivalent to human life because the fetus is not viable. Viability is what defines human life. That is, being able to breathe outside, breathe air normally like a human being does. So a fetus doesn't do that. It's not viable. And also the idea that the fetus is potentially a pursuer, that if the mother's life is in danger, then we're viewing the fetus in this category of being a rodef. And if you have to choose between one or another, you choose viable life over not yet viable life. Okay. Jewish law permits abortion at all stages of pregnancy to protect the mother's health. Okay, it's not just a first term thing, it's not a second term thing, it's an all term idea that if the mother's health is in danger, no matter at what point of the pregnancy, abortion would be permitted according to Jewish law. In general, Jewish approaches to medicine prefer the most effective and least physically invasive methods possible to protect life and health. Therefore, Jewish law permits medication and surgical abortions. While Jewish law favors abortions performed as early as possible, late-term abortions are allowed and sometimes required, particularly when late-term complications can endanger a woman's life or health, which includes her physical and mental health and her ability to bear future children. Okay, so a lot of medical aspects to this as well. Again, you want to do this as early as possible in the pregnancy, if possible. And the idea that the woman's future health is important too, not just her current health. Jewish law has long recognized a woman's overall health includes her mental health. Thus, an abortion may be performed to protect a woman from emotional distress. The classic example, though not relevant today, is found in the Talmud. An abortion must be performed on a pregnant woman condemned to death to save her from the emotional distress of miscarrying as the death sentence is carried out. This precedent led later rabbinic decisors to consider under what conditions an abortion could be permitted for maternal distress. The Conservative Movement's Committee on Jewish Law and Standards has passed teshuvot papers permitting the abortion of a severely deformed fetus or a fetus with little chance of survival, such as with Tay-Sachs, even in the 8th or 9th month, if continuing the pregnancy would cause significant emotional distress to the mother. Okay, so in other words, if there's severely deformed fetus, a terminal illness that the fetus has, and the baby That means the baby will be born and will be viable, but will be severely deformed or will die within 2 or 3 years. Even though the baby is viable, there's emotional distress that condition that the baby is being born with will cause to the mother. And that emotional distress is enough to warrant uh, an abortion uh, while the woman is pregnant with such a fetus. This consideration would clearly apply to permit abortion in cases of rape or incest. So potentially nothing wrong with the fetus genetically, but the rape or the incest itself has caused emotional distress to the woman, and therefore clearly reason for an abortion. Some rabbinic authorities also permit abortion to protect the health of a woman's current children. For example, to protect her milk supply if she is nursing, or by extension, her ability to support them. So it could be financial and emotional. She's already pregnant with, she's already has a number of children. Maybe she's a single mother, or maybe the family is extremely impoverished and they just can't afford this baby, and it's providing that much more emotional and financial stress. There is reason then to permit abortion in that case too. Yes, Bob.
Oh, that sort of goes back to where you raised earlier about you can't have abortion just because you don't want another kid. But I
Right,
see here, they talk about the financial implications. Okay.
right. So it's in other words, mistakes do happen. People, women can, with an IUD or even on the pill, it happens, or other with the use of a condom. There are women do still get pregnant. So there are cases when they've been doing what they can to that is a financially impoverished family, doing what they can to support what the family that they have already, and trying to ensure that no further babies come to the family. In those cases, that if accidents happen like that, in that kind of situation, then abortion would be permitted. Here, Judaism recognizes the right to determine one's own health needs. The observance of almost any commandment, even fasting on the holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur, is subservient to the need to protect the life and health of oneself and others. According to Jewish law, when doctors tell patients they must eat on Yom Kippur, even if they don't want to, they must follow their doctor's orders. However, if individuals feel they must eat on Yom Kippur for health reasons, even if their doctors don't require it, they are allowed to eat. So in other words, we can determine what is best for our own health, even if a doctor might not say the same thing. In this way, rabbinic law was centuries ahead of its time regarding patients' rights. While Jewish law requires us to seek to heal ourselves and others, it also recognizes that individuals are the best and ultimate judge of their own needs. Based on Proverbs 14, only the heart knows its own bitterness. Therefore, to have or not have an abortion is a decision for the pregnant woman to make, for only she knows the bitterness of her own heart. Hopefully, she will also consult her doctor, her rabbi, and if appropriate and safe to do so, significant others. On consulting significant others on abortion decisions, see Rabbi Susan Grossman. Okay, so a woman can decide for herself if she needs to have this abortion based on her understanding of her own mental and physical well-being. Okay, so this is very pro-woman, and it's almost, so this whole paper right now is almost entirely a pro-choice decision, right? So in other words, the pro-choice movement says it's the woman's decision, and a woman can decide at any time whether to have an abortion or not. All this is saying is putting a little bit of a limit on that blanket statement by saying, recognizing that there is a potential for life inside of a woman when she is pregnant, and you can't willy-nilly decide to cancel that potential life. There has to be some kind of extenuating circumstance regarding mental, physical health of the woman, the physical health of the baby, etc. Okay, so it's not a blanket pro-choice, but it's also, so Judaism is also not a pro-life either. Okay, so we fall in between, tending towards the pro-choice position, if you want to put it within the politics in America about this issue. Now, advances in medically assisted fetal viability do not change Judaism's position on abortion. Public debate touches on how advances in neonatology should inform and extend abortion restrictions. The potential gestational age of viability has moved from the last trimester to as early as 23 weeks, with access to proper care and facilities. However, the earlier a baby is born, the lower its chance of survival and the greater its chance of abnormality if it survives. Despite advances in viability prognoses, neither gestational age nor probable viability grants the fetus the status of human life in Jewish law. Even if a fetus were carried full term, it would not be considered a living human until birth. So it doesn't matter how, so a pregnant woman, and she's 28 weeks pregnant, can be argued that if she were to give birth at 28 weeks, that fetus would be viable. Okay, but it's not a human being until that fetus comes out of the body. A fetus is a fetus until it is born. Then it becomes a human being. And so, according to Jewish law, the elements of Jewish law are different regarding a fetus than they are to a human being. And so it doesn't matter when a woman gives birth. What matters is what happens when she gives birth. And if that baby is viable, then it is considered a human being. Okay? While Judaism prefers that abortion occur as early as possible, neonatal advances do not change Judaism's basic position on abortion. A fetus in its mother's body remains legally part of her body and is not yet a human life, regardless of gestational age or prospective viability. Abortion remains permitted or required according to Judaism, depending on the mother's level of need. We are commanded to do whatever we can to heal ourselves and others. The Talmud takes this to be straightforward good sense and learns it from various verses, such as Deuteronomy, take the utmost care and watch yourself scrupulously, and you shall surely heal. We are thus allowed and sometimes obligated to wound a part of the body to heal the whole body. That means we have a religious obligation to take whatever steps are necessary to provide proper medical care, including reproductive health care for ourselves and our loved ones. It also means that healthcare workers and all of us are obligated under Jewish law to do what we can to help heal others, particularly those least able to help themselves. Where secular law contradicts Jewish law, as it does particularly regarding abortion law in some states, we must follow the law of the land, as the great sage Samuel ruled, Dina damachuta dina, the law of the land is a law. As citizens, we can also peacefully advocate for what we consider more just laws. So in other words, this paper isn't saying to Jewish doctors, Jewish OBGYNs, to violate American law in order to perform an abortion. No, this paper is not doing that. It's just saying that for a woman, if she has the financial means to move from Texas or Alabama to Illinois or some other state that permits abortion, that you'd have to do it that way. And another thing is that we can protest these laws, and in those states that are restrictive of abortion, and try to elect different Congress people or state representatives, and who would then try to change or overturn the laws in the state. So we can't violate American law, but we have to work within the system. Opposition to abortion and women's reproductive care primarily grew out of and continues to be fueled by a particular Christian theology that defines life as beginning from conception and abortion as murder. Judaism has a different view. Life begins at birth, and abortion is required when necessary to save a woman's life and is permitted to protect her physical and mental health. The worldwide conservative Masorti movement actively supports efforts to protect women's reproductive health and access to safe and legal abortion when necessary. We do so from the perspective of a community that believes in our responsibility to protect the lives and health of ourselves and others. We also do so as a religious minority seeking the freedom to follow our religious dictates and conscience. Legal efforts to protect women's reproductive health care around the world have not focused on the rights of minority faiths. Nevertheless, it's worth noting that laws restricting access to abortion and reproductive health care represent a particular Christian perspective. Such abortion restrictions deny individuals the right to follow their own religious beliefs and traditions. In the United States, this is a right guaranteed under the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, prohibiting the establishment of religion, specifically that government actions cannot unduly favor one religion over another. So in other words, they're saying it's potentially could go to the Supreme Court that a Jewish pregnant woman could say that the state is violating your religious belief. I don't know if that could ever be a legal argument that could make it through the courts, but that's what this paper is trying to say. Well, in the meantime, I just wanted to be sure that we understood where conservative movement is coming from vis-a-vis abortion, and so that we can be a little bit more informed when we read about the abortion debate in this country. Any other questions or comments about this? Yes, Bob.
In Facebook, the last couple of days, several of my friends have posted something along the lines of, oh crap, hold on. Genesis 2.7, life begins at first breath. God, how the hell did they miss that?
Well, okay. Well, so in other words, they're posting that life begins after birth?
No, at first breath, yeah.
Right. Okay, so I can't speak for Christian theology because I'm not a Christian theologian, but the idea is that life begins when this paper was saying at ensoulment, that when the egg is fertilized and is implanted in the uterine wall, that means that life has begun and a soul has been attached to that person. So it doesn't matter what the Torah says. It doesn't matter what the Christian Bible says. What matters is what the church fathers say and how they interpret. In other words, you could say the same thing. Doesn't matter what the Torah says, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. It seems to say that if somebody cuts off my hand on purpose, I have the right to cut off their hand in retaliation. But the rabbis say, no, even though the Torah says that, that's not what it means. What it means is if somebody cuts off your hand, you're entitled to monetary compensation, right? So the Torah means what the rabbis say it means. So the Bible means what Christian theologians says it means, okay? There's something else in the chat here. Okay, I could, let's see, I could send the link in the chat right now And before I turn on, then you can just click on it yourselves. Let me do that. Just a second here. Okay.
Yeah, I imagine it would be on the website as well.
It is, but I'm just sending it now into the chat. There you go. Okay, so click on it. And now, if you want to see it, before I end the meeting, because if I end the meeting, then your chat goes away, right? Okay, so there's the link. And maybe when I also process this recording, I can send the link out again with the link to the recording of the class too. Okay. All right. Have a good rest of the day, everybody, and we'll see you next week for another Jews in the News. Take care.
Thank you.